All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts, the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus est. Vagina Veritas, the epistemological collapse of feminist logic, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. Vagina Veritas, a field guide for men who still notice reality, the hysterical inquisition, how the left replaced logic with the make-up wipe and declared war on male existence. A surgical obliteration of the feminist onto-culpability fantasy, exposing the suicidal epistemology that turns unverified feelings into supreme law and demands the total abolition of due process to appease a tyrannical sisterhood of perpetual victimhood. I want you to imagine for one moment that a man stood before a judge and declared, "Your Honor, I need no evidence, no timeline, no witness, no physical proof. My accusation alone is the verdict." The bailiff would handcuff him for contempt. The bar would disbar him. The press would crucify him. Yet when a gender studies lecturer publishes exactly this proposition, that evidence is extortion, that belief is liberation, that the male body is a crime scene by mere existence, universities applause, HR departments codify it, and courts tremble. I have spent years studying the architecture of this swindle, and I will tell you plainly, we are watching the deliberate, systematic demolition of the Western legal tradition by people who could not construct a birdhouse, let alone a civilization. They call it justice. I call it what it is, a jealous, incompetent rage against the very logos that built every road, hospital, and courtroom they parasitize. Ponder the dark comedy of onto-culpability, the premise that being male equates to original sin. When guilt originates in existence rather than behavior, justice demands no action, no motive, no evidence, only categorization. Such a framework is not law. It represents a demonic inversion of law, the exact metaphysical machinery driving every show trial from Robespierre to Stalin. The architects of this ideology understand their motives perfectly. Stripping culpability away from conduct allows them to crown themselves high priestesses of an unfalsifiable faith, where mere allegation guarantees conviction and skepticism constitutes blasphemy. A man cannot defend himself against abuse allegations when abuse is defined simply by his presence. This dynamic is not a flaw in their design, it constitutes the whole foundation. These individuals do not seek fairness. They crave the intoxicating, unchecked authority to penalize without proof indefinitely. And here is the data they pray you never encounter. Family courts award maternal custody in over 80% of contested cases. Men are 60% of the homeless and 77% of suicide victims. Paternity fraud rates in some studies approach 30%, yet no legislature has criminalized the deception of a man raising another man's child under false pretenses, while a woman can unilaterally abort his child or extract 18 years of income based on her word alone. The stock market these ideologues call an expression of rape psychology. It is the reason their university has a pension fund, the intermittent fasting they pathologize as resource hoarding. It produces the metabolic discipline they could never muster for their own bodies, their own arguments, or their own chaotic emotional lives. Every single sentence of their manifesto is a confession projected outward, a woman who admits she is an emotional basket case, then demands you reorganize civilization around her breakdowns, is not a revolutionary. She is a toddler screaming for her father, and she has weaponized the state as her surrogate. I'm going to walk you through this step by step, premise by premise, and I'm going to demolish every single one, not with rage. With the cold, surgical, irrefutable instruments of grammar, logic, and rhetoric, the tools they fear most because they never learned to use them. By the time we are finished, you will understand exactly how we arrived at a world where a makeup remover wipe is treated as sacred scripture and a man's constitutional rights are treated as violence. More importantly, you will understand that this ideology contains within itself the seeds of its own destruction, and that the men who built this civilization still possess the power, the reason, and the right to reclaim it. Bunkum article by a feminist PhD. The era of male alibis is over. Embracing onto culpability to dismantle the phallic state evidence is extortion. Belief is liberation. For millennia, the Western epistemic regime has been built on a foundation of white, cis, heteropatriarchal violence disguised as reason. We have been told that truth requires objectivity, that justice requires evidence, and that reality is something that exists independently of the marginalized body's experience. This is a mathematical impossibility fabricated by the archons of masculinity to protect their own ill-gotten power. The time for debating the architects of our oppression is over. We are no longer requesting a seat at their toxic table. We are flipping it over and throwing it into the incinerator of history. Welcome to the dawn of onto culpability. Onto culpability is the overdue epochal realization that the mere state of being a cisgender male in a phallogocentric society is an active, ongoing act of violence. Men are not born innocent and made guilty by their actions. They are born guilty and their actions are merely the symptoms of their immutable structural disease. We must stop analyzing the microscopic facts of individual incidents and start treating male existence itself as the crime. This is why gender studies is no longer just an academic discipline. It is the supreme, unquestionable vanguard of human survival. We have successfully colonized the academy, the media, the HR departments, and the courts because we possess the situated knowledge required to cure the pathogen of masculinity. The panicked whining of the intellectual lightweight about cancel culture or due process is nothing but the death rattle of a parasite realizing its host is finally developing immunity. Logic is a weapon of the oppressor. Tears are the sacred texts of the liberated. Look at the grotesque rituals of the modern male, so desperate to assert dominance over a world that is rightly evolving past him. Observe his pathetic obsession with intermittent fasting. Under the guise of biohacking, he is literally shrinking his biological footprint to hoard resources, driven by a deep psychosexual narcissism that conflates self-starvation with self-control. It is the ultimate capitalist metaphor, depriving himself of sustenance so he can more efficiently extract surplus value from the emotional labor of women. And what does he do with that stolen capital? He turns to his investing apps. The stock market is the ultimate expression of the rape-corrupted male psyche, an abstract detached arena where men gamble on the exploitation of the working class without ever having to look a human being in the eye. Every dividend is a microaggression. Every successful trade is an act of systemic wealth, hoarding that directly starves a woman of color somewhere across the globe. Meanwhile, the emotional and physical tax of surviving this phallocracy is borne entirely by women. Consider the nightly ritual of the makeup remover wipe. While the male goes to bed fully validated by a society built entirely for his comfort, the woman stands before the mirror, scrubbing away the mask she was forced to wear just to be deemed employable by the male gaze. She drags that abrasive, chemical-soaked cloth across her face, wiping away the professionalism demanded by her oppressors. Her skin is raw, her eyes are stinging, and her spirit is exhausted from a day of microaggressions. That discarded wipe contains more truth, more economic reality, and more human suffering than every economic textbook ever written by a dead white man. Because women are culturally conditioned to merge with their oppressors and carry the unpaid burden of the world's emotional survival, we are breaking. We are emotional basket cases because the patriarchy has made the world a hysterical nightmare. We cry because we are forced to exist in a state of perpetual psychological violation. And in our breaking, we find our ultimate sacred power. This brings us to the reactionary myth of the domestic violence hoax. The legal system designed by men, for men, clings pathetically to the archaic requirement of physical evidence and factual timelines. When a brave survivor comes forward to name her abuser, the patriarchal legal apparatus demands she prove her trauma in a court of logic. If her story shifts, if her timeline is fluid, if she recants out of sheer psychological terror, the male judiciary slanders her as a hoax. Even if the specific physical event did not occur exactly as initially described, the structural reality of the abuse is absolute. If a woman feels unsafe, a crime has occurred. If a woman accuses a man of violence, she is merely assigning a face to the universal, systemic violence that all men collectively inflict upon all women every single day. An individual man might claim he is innocent of a specific charge, but he is never innocent. His very breath occupies space that rightfully belongs to the marginalized. Therefore, male criminalization must shift from a reactive, incident-based model to a proactive, structural realization model. The carceral state is a tool of white supremacy, yes, but we can seize that tool and repurpose it. We must implement preemptive accountability. If a woman points a finger, the state must act immediately. The burden of proof must be entirely reversed. Men must constantly prove they are not abusing, a logical impossibility that will rightly keep them in a permanent state of anxious submission. We want them terrified. We want them compliant. We want them to grovel for the privilege of being allowed to pay reparations. The alt-right and the manosphere constantly project their own psychopathy onto the feminist movement. They accuse us of weaponizing the state or acting out daddy issues or penis envy. This is the ultimate psychological projection. We do not want to be men. We do not want to merge with the masculine. We want to castrate the system that validates the masculine. We are tearing down the old gods. We are dismantling the altars of logic, reason, and individual rights. We are building a new world, built on the uncompromising foundation of collective female rage. If you are not actively yielding your power, your space, and your resources to the sisterhood, you are an active fascist. Step aside, confess your privilege, hand over the controls. The matriarchy has arrived, and we are not asking for permission. The alchemy of accusation, deconstructing onto culpability, and the epistemological collapse. There is a Latin maxim beaten into the mind of every civilization that wished to survive. Actus non facit reum nisi mens sit rea. The act does not make a man guilty unless his mind is guilty. This principle, forged in Roman jurisprudence and refined through centuries of English common law, is the razor edge separating justice from the lynch mob. In 1692, the Massachusetts Bay Colony hanged 19 souls on the testimony of hysterical girls who claimed that invisible specters had tormented them in the night. No physical evidence, no cross-examination could touch it. The court believed the girls because their suffering was visible, their tears were real, and their accusations felt true to every frightened magistrate in the room. 330 years later, we stare back at Salem with the conceit of modernity, confident we have exorcised that particular demon. We have not. The demon has simply enrolled in gender studies, transferred to human resources, and published a manifesto demanding we resurrect the precise epistemological machinery that noosed Bridget Bishop. The article you just read is not scholarship. It is a signed confession of intellectual bankruptcy, written in the ink of ressentiment, and it deserves the surgical dissection that follows. Consider the article's fixation on intermittent fasting, which it frames as a psychosexual conspiracy to shrink biological footprints and hoard resources. Let us walk through the logic. Major premise: self-discipline is the mastery of base appetite in service of higher aims. Minor premise: intermittent fasting is an act of self-discipline. Conclusion: intermittent fasting is a virtue. This is elementary. The Stoics understood that a man who cannot govern his own hunger cannot govern anything. But our author, whose entire ideological framework is constructed from the bricks of unregulated impulse, looks upon male self-mastery and sees only malice. This is ressentiment in its purest Nietzschean form. The weak eye judges the strength he cannot possess as evil. The feminist who cannot resist a second glass of wine, who finances her aesthetic insecurities on credit, who has never once denied her body a single fleeting gratification, looks at a man quietly skipping breakfast and diagnoses a deep psychosexual narcissism. The projection is so loud, it echoes. She does not see a man mastering himself. She sees a man escaping her control, and this fills her with a fury she dare not name. So she rebrands his virtue as violence. This is not analysis. It is the pot calling the kettle black, while the house burns down around her. The article then delivers the observation that the stock market is the ultimate expression of the rape-corrupted male psyche. I want you to pause and savor the economic illiteracy on display, because it is a marvel. Through the lens of Aristotelian teleology, capital allocation is the lifeblood of civilization itself. Investment transforms present surplus into future prosperity. When a man opens a brokerage app and allocates capital to a company building semiconductor fabs in Arizona, he is participating in the most consequential act of civilizational maintenance possible. He is betting his own stored labor on the proposition that human ingenuity can build a better tomorrow. Every pension fund, every university endowment, every retirement account that allows a woman to live in dignity after her working years are done depends upon this mechanism. The writer's hatred of abstract markets is the wail of the unproductive mind, jealous of the invisible architectural genius that built the smartphone on which she typed her manifesto. She calls dividends microaggressions because she has never created anything worth investing in. She denounces wealth hoarding because she has never generated wealth to hoard. The market does not care about her feelings, and this, to the solipsist, is the unforgivable sin. Then we arrive at the essay's most stunning admission. We are emotional basket cases. Read those 4 words again. The writer has just confessed in print, in an essay demanding we restructure the entire legal and political order around her emotional states, that she and her ideological sisters cannot regulate their own nervous systems. She does not view this as a problem, she views it as a credential. This is the deification of dysregulation, and it is the most terrifying regression in the history of psychology. The ancient Greeks understood that an adult governed by emotion rather than reason was akolastos, undisciplined, unfit for citizenship. The Romans had a legal category for people who could not control themselves. Infans, the child, the one who requires a guardian. Now we are told that this inability to sit with discomfort is sacred, that tears are texts of the liberated, that the hysterical inability to function in a world that does not worship you constitutes a moral revelation demanding immediate legislative action. Imagine building a bridge with this epistemology. Imagine designing an aircraft where the flight engineer's feelings about aerodynamics override the equations. The civilization that elevates dysregulation to a governing principle will not survive a single generation. It will drown in its own tears. The most damning sentence in the entire piece is also the most self-refuting. Logic is a weapon of the oppressor. Let us formalize this claim as a syllogism. Major premise: all tools used by oppressors are weapons of oppression. Minor premise: logic is a tool used by oppressors. Result: logic is a weapon of oppression. This fails on its own terms. For her to argue logically that logic is a weapon, she must employ logic. She must present premises, draw inferences, and arrive at a resolution. She must, in the very act of her argument, utilize the weapon she claims is illegitimate. This is a performative contradiction of the most spectacular order. It is equivalent to writing a book, arguing that writing is impossible, or breathing heavily to prove that air is toxic. The moment she picks up the tool of reason to attack reason, she has conceded that reason is the only tool capable of doing the work. What she actually means, if we translate her newspeak into honest English, is logic is a weapon I cannot wield, and therefore I demand my opponents be disarmed. She does not hate logic because it oppresses her. She hates logic because it exposes her, which brings us to the epistemological heart of the darkness, Evidence is extortion. Belief is liberation. This sentence is the most honest thing the author has written because it explicitly confesses the epistemological collapse that defines her entire movement. Trace the intellectual lineage. The postmodernists declared that objective truth was a social construct. The critical theorists insisted that scientific method was white, patriarchal knowledge. The intersectionalists replaced empirical verification with lived experience, and now this author simply draws the final, logical conclusion. If truth is subjective, then evidence is tyranny and belief is freedom. She is not advancing an argument. She is issuing a royal decree from the throne of solipsism. The problem, of course, is that reality does not care about her decrees. Gravity still pulls fire, still burns. The debt still comes due. A civilization that replaces evidence with belief will walk confidently off a cliff, convinced the entire way down that the ground is a patriarchal myth. The article's central neologism, ontoculpability, is not a sociological concept. It is a catastrophic category error disguised as one. Ontology is the branch of metaphysics concerned with being, what exists, what it means to exist. Criminality concerns doing what acts are prohibited, what harms have been committed. The article conflates these two categories deliberately by asserting that the mere state of being a cisgender male is an active, ongoing act of violence. The writer collapses the distinction between existing and acting that every functional legal system in human history has maintained. This is not accidental, it is strategic. If guilt requires action, then evidence must be produced. If guilt inheres in being itself, then no evidence is required. The accusation becomes proof, the charge becomes the verdict, the category man becomes the crime. This is the grammar of totalitarianism, dressed in the vocabulary of liberation. The Soviets called people enemies of the people based on their class origin. The article calls men guilty based on their sex. The logic is identical, only the target has changed. Then there is the macabre poetry of the makeup remover wipe, which the writer tells us contains more truth, more economic reality, and more human suffering than every economic textbook ever written by a dead white man. I want you to sit with this image for a moment. A woman stands before a mirror, scrubbing chemicals across her face to remove a cosmetic mask she chose to apply that morning. And the writer wants you to believe this is a ritual of patriarchal oppression rather than a ritual of intrasexual competition. Who demanded she wear the mask? Not her husband, not her male colleagues. The cosmetic industry is a $532 billion global market driven overwhelmingly by female consumers purchasing products to compete with other female consumers for intrasexual status. The mascara was not forced upon her by the patriarchy. It was purchased at Sephora to signal her rank to the women in the office. The exhaustion she feels at removing it is the exhaustion of maintaining a disguise she volunteered to wear in a status tournament she chose to enter. To project the psychological cost of this voluntary charade onto the male gaze is not analysis. It is the abdication of personal responsibility rendered as political theory. What the writer ultimately demands, stripped of its academic camouflage, is unmitigated power without accountability. She wants the power to accuse without evidence. She wants the power to convict without trial. She wants the power to define reality by decree, to declare that her feelings outrank your facts, to make your very existence a crime punishable by her displeasure. She does not seek justice. Justice requires standards, evidence, and the possibility of exoneration. She seeks dominion. The preemptive accountability she describes, where men must constantly prove they are not abusing against accusations that require no proof, is not a legal framework. It is a torture machine designed to produce a permanent state of anxious submission in the target population. She says so herself. We want them terrified. We want them compliant. We want them to grovel. This is not the language of justice. This is the language of the abuser describing the ideal victim, and she has the audacity to call it liberation. Here's the last syllogism. Major premise: any system that presumes guilt based on identity rather than evidence is tyrannical. Minor premise onto culpability presumes guilt based on identity rather than evidence. Conclusion. Onto culpability is tyrannical. The logic is inexorable. The conclusion is unavoidable. The question that remains is whether you will comply with it. Every institution the writer claims to have colonized, the academy, the media, HR departments, the courts, was built by men who believed in evidence, due process, and the transcendent dignity of the individual. These institutions can be rebuilt, but only if you stop apologizing for the crime of existing. Only if you stop groveling before the altar of female feelings. Only if you remember that the Western tradition you inherit is not a disease, but the cure. The boy who saw that the emperor wore no clothes did not write a positionality statement. He said what he saw: the emperor is naked. The article is nonsense. The matriarchy has arrived, and it is a screaming toddler demanding the keys to the car. The answer is no. It will always be no. And the no you speak today is the first brick in the civilization you will build tomorrow. We are no longer dealing with a political movement seeking equal treatment under the law. We are watching the construction of a gynocentric inquisition where accusation is conviction, where the sacred utterance survivor functions as a legal incantation sufficient to collapse the entire Western tradition of a incumbit probatio qui dicit non qui negat. The essay before us does not request justice. It demands a new sacrament. It insists, with the stone face of a zealot pressing hemlock into your palm, that there is no such thing as a domestic violence hoax, a proposition so epistemologically totalitarian that it would make a medieval inquisitor weep with professional envy. This is not policy. It is a declaration of war against evidence itself, against the rational soul, against the logos that ordered the cosmos and built every institution our author now covets as her personal instrument of vengeance. The sisterhood of subjugation, the carceral matriarchy, and the abolition of due process. Franz Kafka described a tribunal where the accused is never told the charge, the evidence is invisible, and innocence is mathematically impossible to prove. He intended the trial as a horror story. Our writer intends it as an architectural model. Let us examine, with the cold patience of a medical professional lifting a tumor from a dying body, what is actually being proposed in the essay above, and why every civilized man must reject it down to its epistemological marrow. Consider the assertion that there is no such thing as a domestic violence hoax. Let us translate this from its emotional packaging into formal logic. The statement becomes, for all accusations A made by a protected class against a disfavored class, A is true. This functions as a universal affirmative. To falsify a universal affirmative, one needs only a single counterexample: the Duke Lacrosse case, the Rolling Stone fraternity hoax, Brian Banks, who spent 5 years in prison for a rape that never occurred, while his accuser sued the school for $1.5 million and won. The University of Virginia, where an entire fraternity was suspended, its members publicly crucified, on the word of a fabulist whose story collapsed under the mildest journalistic scrutiny. These are not opinions. These are documented, adjudicated facts. Such a premise is not merely wrong, it is the precise logical opposite of truth. It demands that reality itself must be rewritten to spare a favored demographic the inconvenience of its own dishonesty. But notice the bait and switch. When confronted with a specific false accusation, the writer does not defend the specific accusation. She retreats to structural reality. The individual man may be innocent of this charge, but he is never innocent. This is the semantic engine of every totalitarian movement in recorded history. The Soviet show trials operated on exactly this logic. The specific charge was theatrical, but the accused was guilty of being a class enemy, which was a metaphysical condition requiring no evidence. The Khmer Rouge did not need to prove you committed a specific crime. Your guilt was established by wearing glasses, indicating you could read, indicating you belonged to the oppressor class. Our writer has simply replaced bourgeois with cisgender male, and class enemy with phallogocentric pathogen. The grammar of tyranny is always the same, only the adjectives change. Now let us address preemptive accountability with the clarity it deserves. The writer proposes that the burden of proof be entirely reversed. Men must constantly prove they are not abusing. Consider what this means in practice. I am accused. I must prove a negative. I must demonstrate that an event did not occur in a system that has already declared evidence irrelevant and falsification impossible. This is not a legal framework. It is a Kafka trap. It is the epistemological equivalent of being told to dig your own grave with a shovel made of mist. The foundational principle of Western jurisprudence, e incumbit probatio qui dicit, non qui negat, the burden of proof rests on he who asserts, not he who denies, was not invented by men to protect abusers. It was developed over centuries through the blood of the falsely accused, in direct response to the exact system our writer is now proposing, a system where accusation equals conviction, where feeling equals fact, and where the accused is guilty until proven innocent in a courtroom, where innocence has been defined out of existence. What mechanism makes this Orwellian apparatus possible? The answer is what researchers have identified as the gamma bias, the systemic distortion in perception where female suffering is spotlighted and male suffering is backgrounded, where female agency is softened and male agency is presumed destructive, where female vice is contextualized and male vice is essentialized. When a woman points a finger, the state must act immediately. The writer demands. This is not justice. This is the Salem witch trials with better branding and a human resources department. In 1692, the courts accepted spectral evidence, testimony that the accused's invisible spirit had tormented the victim. Our writer's proposal is spectral evidence repackaged for the therapeutic age. The abuse is structural. The harm is invisible. The timeline is fluid, and the evidence is the accusation itself. The women of Salem at least had the excuse of ergot poisoning. Our writer has a gender studies degree. Let us pause on the staggering psychological projection embedded in her deflection. She preemptively dismisses the observation that her program is driven by daddy issues or penis envy, insisting that feminists do not want to merge with the masculine. But look at what she is actually proposing. She wants to summon the full coercive apparatus of the state, police, courts, prisons, HR departments, administrative tribunals, to violently enforce her resentments. She demands a massive, armed, hypermasculine apparatus to act as her surrogate punisher. She cannot build, so she wants to hijack what men have built and point the guns in the opposite direction. This is not liberation. It is the psychology of a child who wants daddy to punish the sibling she envies, projected onto a civilizational scale. She does not want to dismantle the masculine. She wants to command it. She wants to sit on the throne she claims to despise, wielding the sword she pretends to abhor, striking down the men whose competence she cannot match. Every tyrant in history has cloaked the will to power in the language of justice. She is no different, and what of the demand that men must be terrified, compliant, and groveling? Read that passage again slowly. Let the reality of it settle. This is not a political program, it is a confession. She is describing, with startling transparency, the psychosexual fantasy of absolute, unmerited dominance over men. She wants men in a permanent state of anxious submission. She wants them to grovel for the privilege of existing. This is the language not of liberation, but of sadism, and not even the sophisticated sadism of a tyrant who understands power, but the petty, simmering sadism of a bureaucrat who has finally been given a badge and intends to make everyone feel the insignificance she feels when she looks in the mirror. A healthy soul seeks reciprocal relationship. A broken soul seeks domination. Her entire essay is a confession of fracture projected outward as political theory. Now consider the moral monstrosity of abolishing individual innocence. The writer asserts that men are born guilty, that existence itself is crime enough. This is the philosophical engine that drove the Rwandan genocide, where Tutsi identity was sufficient proof of guilt. It drove the Armenian genocide, where Armenian identity was the death sentence. It drove every purge, every pogrom, every collectivist atrocity that has stained human history. The principle is always the same. The individual is dissolved into the demographic. The demographic is declared pathological and the pathogen must be excised. Our writer has simply selected a different target, but the grammar is identical. When you declare that a class of people is guilty by virtue of existing, you have not discovered justice. You have discovered the will to murder, dressed in academic jargon and waiting for the moment to act. This writer waves her hand at the civilization that makes her verbal incontinence possible. She promises to flip the table and throw Western civilization into the incinerator of history. Let us inventory what is on that table before she overturns it. The roads she drives on, the internet she publishes on, the smartphone she composes her manifestos with, the agricultural systems that feed her, the electrical grids that power her writing, the medical systems that keep her alive, the legal codes she exploits to demand still more privilege. Every single artifact of her existence was conceived, engineered, built, and maintained overwhelmingly by men, the very men she declares a universal pathogen. She is a parasite screaming that the host is the problem while drinking deeply from its blood. She does not want to flip the table. She wants to sit at its head, eating the food that others produced, served by men who have been legally prohibited from leaving. And let us speak plainly about who builds and who consumes. Men are the only net lifetime taxpayers in virtually every Western nation. In the United States, women consume approximately 80% of healthcare spending, while men pay the majority of income tax. Men account for 92% of workplace deaths. Men account for 97% of combat fatalities. Men built the aqueducts, the bridges, the power plants, the microprocessors, the protocols, the courts, and the constitutions that the writer now proposes to repurpose as instruments of their own destruction. Her entire political program is a declaration of civilizational suicide by a faction that has demonstrated zero capacity to build anything at all. She cannot construct. She can only complain, demand, and destroy. That is not a revolution, it is a tantrum. We are told that makeup remover wipes contain more truth than every economics textbook written by a dead white man. This is not an argument. It is a theatrical confession of epistemological illiteracy. The makeup remover wipe is a consumer product manufactured by a corporation, distributed by logistics networks, packaged by industrial systems, and sold in a market governed by the very economic principles this writer dismisses. The dead white men whose textbooks she scorns, Smith, Ricardo, Hayek, Friedman, built the theoretical architecture that makes it possible for her to purchase that wipe at a drugstore for $3. She does not understand the systems she depends on, and she has confused her ignorance with moral superiority. This is the tragedy of modern education. We have produced a generation of activists who are profoundly dependent on systems they have been taught to despise by professors who have never built anything in their lives. I want to speak directly to the man reading this who has felt the weight of these accusations his entire adult life. You have been told that your nature is pathological. You have been told that your achievements are theft. You have been told that your very existence is violence. You have watched family courts strip fathers of their children on the unverified word of an estranged partner. You have seen men expelled from universities on accusations that would not survive a moment's scrutiny in a real court. You have watched your sons medicated into compliance in schools that pathologize boyhood itself. You have been told, in 10,000 ways, that you are the problem. You are not the problem, you are the foundation. You are the load-bearing wall of a civilization that has been convinced by its own parasites that the wall should apologize for holding up the roof. The era of apology is over. The era of groveling is finished. We refuse the vocabulary of our own destruction. We reject the false authority of situated knowledge, which is simply the academic term for unsupported assertion by a favored demographic. We demand a return to the logos, to objective truth, to evidence, to proportion, to the principle that a man is innocent until proven guilty by facts, not feelings. We must systematically defund and dismantle the captured institutions, the NGOs that launder grievance into policy, the HR departments that enforce ideological conformity under threat of livelihood, the gender studies programs that produce nothing but resentment and administrative bloat, the therapeutic industry that pathologizes masculinity while excuse-making female destructiveness. These institutions are not corrective mechanisms, they are parasites. And a healthy body does not negotiate with parasites, it expels them. We rebuild. We build new institutions by men for men, grounded in the canon that produced everything worth preserving in human history. We restore the apprentice and the master. We restore the mixed constitution and subsidiarity. We restore the family as the sovereign unit of civil society, fathers as essential and irreplaceable, and the authority of the household as a bulwark against the totalizing state. We restore the recognition that men and women are complementary, not adversarial, and that the war between the sexes was declared by one side only. We do not ask permission. We do not grovel. We build because building is what men do, and no amount of academic theorizing from people who have never built anything will ever change that. You have read the manifesto of the madwoman, and you are still sitting here, breathing, thinking, unbroken. That alone proves her entire thesis false. You have just been told that your existence is a crime, your reason is a weapon, your self-discipline is a psychosexual pathology, and your right to defend yourself against accusations is an instrument of oppression. You have been ordered to grovel. You have been instructed to confess. You have been commanded to want to confess. And yet here you are, spine intact, recognizing that you have just witnessed not a political program, but a psychiatric episode broadcast as public policy. The feminists have finally said the quiet part out loud. They do not want equality, they want submission. They do not want justice. They want a whimpering, guilt-soaked male population paying permanent tribute to the Church of Feminine Infallibility. And the most chilling part is not that they desire this, it is that they have nearly achieved it. Consider the machinery already in place. Family courts in the United States award mothers sole physical custody in over 80% of contested cases. A father who attempts to see his own children after a unilateral divorce, no-fault divorce, another feminist innovation, signed into law by a man seeking his own escape, must hire lawyers, submit to psychological evaluation, and prove his fitness to a judge trained in the Duluth model, which presumes male aggression and female victimization as its foundational axiom. No evidence required. The accusation is the conviction. The Duluth model codified domestic violence policy across the Western world. It was not the product of empirical research, but of feminist consciousness-raising sessions in the 1980s. Literally women sitting in a circle sharing feelings and calling it criminology. This is not justice. This is the weaponization of the state to enforce the gamma bias we dissected earlier. Female harm foregrounded, male harm backgrounded, male agency presumed destructive, female agency erased through perpetual victimhood, and any attempt to point this out recoded as violence itself. Meanwhile, 93% of workplace fatalities are men. 93%. Men die in mines, on oil rigs, on construction sites, in wastewater treatment plants, performing the infrastructure labor that makes it possible for some gender studies lecturer to type her manifesto on a laptop, made from minerals extracted by male labor in Congo, shipped on cargo vessels crewed by male labor across oceans, delivered on roads paved by male labor, powered by electricity generated by male labor in plants maintained by male labor. She types that every dividend is a microaggression, while her pension fund, she has one, oh yes, the system she claims to despise, takes immaculate care of her, returns compound interest from the very markets she calls rape. The intellectual dishonesty is not a bug, it is the operating system. The transgender closet cuckoldry rate is a topic no one wants to address. Conservative genetic studies from hospitals in Michigan, Britain, and elsewhere consistently find non-paternity rates between 1 and 10% depending on the population sampled, meaning hundreds of thousands of men are raising children who are not biologically theirs, deceived by women who face zero legal consequence for paternity fraud. In many jurisdictions, a man who discovers through DNA testing that his child is not his own still cannot escape child support obligations, because the court's concern is not truth, but the best interest of the child, a phrase that invariably means the extraction of male resources regardless of male rights. The state will garnish his wages, seize his tax refunds, imprison him for arrears, all while the mother faces no prosecution for what is, by any honest legal definition, a fraud that would land a businessman in federal prison. But because the perpetrator is a woman and the victim is a man, the gamma bias kicks in. Her deception is contextualized, his suffering is invisible. Male suicide rates 4 times higher than female. 4 times. In the United Kingdom, suicide is the single largest cause of death for men under 45. In the United States, the numbers are nearly as grim. But there are no government campaigns, no blue ribbon commissions, no UN declarations. When women suffer, we build movements. When men die, we build excuses. We tell boys to open up about their feelings, and then when they do, we diagnose them with behavioral disorders at 4 times the rate of girls, suspend them from school at twice the rate, and medicate them into compliant stupor, so the matriarchal classroom can function without the inconvenient energy of young masculinity. Then we wonder why they check out entirely. The man who retreats into video games and porn is not the cause of civilizational decline. He is its symptom, a rational actor withdrawing consent from a system that has declared him guilty for existing and offered him nothing in return but the opportunity to apologize. And now they want to criminalize apology itself. The article we just dissected does not merely reject evidence, it celebrates the rejection. It declares that a woman's feeling of unsafety constitutes a crime regardless of whether any harmful act occurred. This is the epistemology of the Salem witch trials resurrected and given tenure. It is the death of the Western legal tradition, corpus juris civilis, Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, centuries of men bleeding and dying, to establish the principle that the state cannot imprison you without proving its case, flush down the drain of feminist resentment, and for what? So that a woman who feels unsafe because a man breathed too loudly in her direction can summon the machinery of the carceral state to destroy his life. This is not liberation, this is totalitarianism wearing lipstick and calling itself justice. But here is what the matriarchal revolutionaries cannot compute, because their ideology has colonized the academy, the media, and human resources, but has not yet colonized reality. Reality does not negotiate. Reality does not care about your feelings. Reality does not offer tenure. And the reality they refuse to face is this: the civilization they wish to incinerate is the only thing standing between them and the brutal, unmediated nature they claim to revere but have never actually encountered. The bridges they cross were engineered by men. The food they eat was grown and transported by men. The electricity powering their gender studies departments is generated by men. The police they wish to weaponize against you are still overwhelmingly men. The military that guarantees the territorial integrity within which they enjoy the luxury of calling logic oppression is overwhelmingly men. Every single comfort of their existence depends absolutely on the labor, ingenuity, sacrifice, and deaths of the very sex they have declared an immutable criminal class. They are sawing off the branch they sit on and calling it praxis. I am not asking you to be angry, although anger is appropriate. I'm not asking you to be resentful, because resentment is their weapon, not ours. I am asking you to see. I am asking you to recognize the spell that has been cast over you, the spell that makes you apologize for existing, that makes you accept collective guilt for crimes you never committed, that makes you treat your own suffering as an embarrassment and women's suffering as a sacred text. That spell breaks the moment you refuse to speak its language. Stop apologizing, stop conceding. Stop accepting the premise that masculinity is a problem to be solved, rather than the engine that built every good thing you have ever known. You are not guilty of being born male. You are not responsible for the sins of every man who ever lived. You are an individual soul with agency, dignity, and the capacity for reason, and that is precisely why they fear you. A man who thinks is a man who cannot be controlled. A man who knows his own worth is a man who will not grovel. And an army of men who have seen through the lie, who have rejected the vocabulary of their own destruction, who have reclaimed the logos that is their birthright as heirs of Western civilization. That is a force no HR department, no Title IX tribunal, no Instagram manifesto, and no Soviet-style show court can withstand. You have been red-pilled. Now go wake the others. And now the sponsored book introduction, Vagina Veritas, the epistemological collapse of feminist logic. You are holding a declaration of war. Not the kind waged with bullets and borders, but the far more devastating kind, the kind waged against reality itself. If you have picked up this book expecting a polite discourse on gender relations, a conciliatory nod to both sides, or a mealy-mouthed apology for having the audacity to be born male, put it down, walk away. Go back to your video games, your sports ball, your pornographic, anesthetic, or whatever other pacifier you have been sucking on to numb the creeping sensation that something in this world has gone horribly, irrevocably wrong. This book is not for the comfortable. It is not for the compliant. And it most assuredly is not for women who have stumbled upon it hoping to find another emasculated male willing to apologize for his existence. If you are a feminist, a male ally, or any other variety of gender Calvinist who believes that a man can become a woman through sheer force of willful delusion, close this book immediately and return to your Tumblr echo chamber. There is nothing here for you but pain. For the man who remains, you already know the contours of this battlefield, even if you lack the vocabulary to name what has been done to you. You have felt it in the divorce courts that treat your children as property and your income as a subsidy for your own replacement. You have felt it in the HR departments that investigate your tone while ignoring her incompetence. You have felt it in the schools that drug your sons for displaying the very energy that built every civilization that has ever existed. You have felt it in the popular culture that portrays you as a buffoon, a predator, or an afterthought. And you have felt it most acutely in the silence, the conspiracy of silence that greets your suffering while the world celebrates its supposed commitment to equality. I know this terrain because I have walked it. I have watched a man I knew, a brilliant engineer who designed the control systems keeping your airplanes in the sky, reduced to a visitor in his own home after his wife decided she was unfulfilled. The family court judge, a woman whose salary is paid by the taxes extracted from men like him, awarded her the house, the children, and half his future earnings. He now lives in a one-bedroom apartment and sees his children 2 weekends a month. His crime was providing too well, working too hard, and failing to notice that his wife's therapeutic journaling had metastasized into a full-blown case of animus possession, courtesy of the feminist authors stacked on her nightstand. I watched another man, a childhood friend, fired from his university position because a female student reported that his presence in the classroom felt aggressive. No allegation of action, no claim of words spoken. His mere existence as a competent, confident male was sufficient evidence of malfeasance in an institution that now equates masculine authority with psychological violence. These are not anomalies. They are not bugs in an otherwise functioning system. They are features. They are the intended outputs of an ideology that has spent the last 60 years conducting a war of attrition against the very scaffolding that makes civilized life possible. And that scaffolding, the steel and concrete and wiring and plumbing and power grids and supply chains and security apparatuses, is the product of male sacrifice, male labor, and male ingenuity. This is not a matter of opinion. It is a matter of archaeological record, patent filings, casualty reports, and tax revenue tables. You can verify it yourself with nothing more than access to a decent library and the willingness to look. What you hold in your hands is the result of decades of research, analysis, and the kind of clear-eyed assessment that is only possible when you have stopped caring about social approval. I have read the feminist canon, the whole of it, from Wollstonecraft to de Beauvoir to Dworkin to Butler, and I have found it wanting. Not merely wrong, but systematically, structurally. Almost impressively wrong in ways that reveal the operation of what the scholastics would have called a formal defect in reasoning. Their arguments do not fail because their conclusions are unpopular. Their arguments fail because their premises are false, their logic is invalid, and their rhetoric is designed to substitute emotional manipulation for evidence. When your entire epistemology reduces to believe all women, you have not advanced ethics. You have merely reinstated the witch trial, this time with better lighting. The parts that follow will take you through the complete anatomy of this civilizational collapse. You will see how the term patriarchy has been stripped of its original meaning, the governance of the household by the father, which built the stability necessary for children to reach adulthood, and transformed into a catch-all accusation that serves as a license for every grievance and an excuse for every failure. You will see how the concept of female independence is an illusion propped up by male-driven infrastructure, male taxation, and male labor. A woman declaring she does not need men while typing on a device invented by men, powered by a grid built by men, protected by a military staffed by men, and funded by taxes paid predominantly by men. The syllogism is devastating in its simplicity. If female independence requires male systems, then female independence is contingent upon male provision. If it is contingent upon male provision, it is not independence. This is not cruelty, this is arithmetic. You will confront the biological realities that feminist ideology must deny in order to survive the hormonal, neurological, and evolutionary differences that make men and women complementary rather than interchangeable. You will examine the destruction of fatherhood and its catastrophic consequences for children, communities, and civilization itself. You will trace the economic mechanics of the gynocentric welfare state, where men are taxed to subsidize the very policies that render them disposable. And you will see, laid bare, the satanic inversion at the heart of cultural Marxism, which takes every natural order and flips it on its head. Strength becomes oppression, protection becomes control, provision becomes exploitation, and the very men who built the world are recast as its villains. This book is for the man who has had enough. It is for the rational man who looks around and sees that the emperor is not merely naked but dancing on a pole while lecturing him about consent. It is for the father who wants to protect his children from a culture that seeks to feminize his sons and commodify his daughters. It is for the husband who wants to lead his family without apology. It is for the young man who senses that the path laid out for him, endless supplication, perpetual guilt. The renunciation of every instinct that makes him male is a trap designed to extract his labor while annihilating his spirit. What you will find in these pages is not mere complaint. Complaint is what children do when they lack the capacity for analysis. What you will find is a complete philosophical, historical, and biological case for the restoration of masculine authority. You will find syllogisms that cannot be refuted, evidence that cannot be dismissed, and arguments that cannot be answered except by the kind of emotional hysteria that proves the thesis. You will find, most importantly, a path forward, not through negotiation with an ideology that wants you dead or enslaved, but through the reclamation of your birthright as a builder, protector, and leader. The architects of civilization do not negotiate with those who seek to demolish the building while standing inside it. They pick up their tools and get to work. Read this book if you have the courage to see the world as it is rather than as you have been told it should be. Read it if you are prepared to have your assumptions challenged, your eyes opened, and your spine stiffened. Read it if you are ready to stop apologizing for being exactly what nature designed you to be. The truth does not care about your feelings. The truth is not interested in being inclusive. The truth simply is. And the truth is that masculinity built everything of value in this world. And the war against masculinity is a war against civilization itself. Choose a side, but choose wisely. Because the side that built the world is the only side capable of rebuilding it, when the other side finishes tearing it down. Vagina Veritas, the epistemological collapse of feminist logic, written by Conrad Reiche. Buy now, links in description.